Now we're live.
Yeah.
No, that's how we're never gonna start like that. That's wrong. It's the wrongest way.
Why not? Why? I think it's fine. I
Just
think it's fine.
screaming?
Like, I don't even really care. No. Just start.
All right, here's what we got to start. We got to start. We're both gonna say "Let's go" at the top of our lungs, and then we'll just cut in
No,
halfway
no,
through.
no, because that is literally what Maximilian does.
Is it
Not
really?
yeah,
Because
that is literally his start thing. When he put his YouTube videos, it's just literally screaming, "Let's go!"
let's go! All right, I will never do that again. So yeah, I guess this
did
is
you
the
want me
start
to
of the
share this thing,
what?
or do you want me to just lead it and like tell you when we're at certain things?
What do you mean? Share what?
Like this outline I have.
Oh,
Do you want me to just
no,
introduce each
yeah,
topic?
no, you do it. Yeah. I want you to control it because if I'm prepping for it, I'll be thinking too much about what's coming next instead of being in the moment.
Okay.
We don't have a name. What's the name? Or we just call it? I like Big PP Podcast.
Oh my god. Welcome to the Big PP Podcast with Hero and Posterghost. This is a first podcast. We're just going to be working our way through it, trying to see what works, throwing shit at the wall, see what sticks. I am Piro, and
Now I'm Poster Ghost. Yeah, that's me. I'm the one.
And we're going to be
with the biggest PP. This is the big PP club, but I have the biggest one. I just need to make that very clear.
Like on a shelf, like you keep it like in a jar.
Well,
you're a collector.
I mean, that's formaldehyde is expensive, so that's why we're starting this podcast.
Like I stored it in milk. You know?
Oh no, that's terrible.
We're just gonna kind of talk about the things that are coming up, find out what works, and just go from there, I guess.
Yeah. He's gonna try his best. Oh wait, what? Sorry.
We're gonna try to hit some music, video games. I have some anime stuff, but I'm mostly gonna. I know one of us is gonna be outraged. So, and then we're gonna talk about some music, make some suggestions, and then just sort of go from there. I'm gonna say that a lot. I feel like.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's kind of stuff I can also cut around. I mean, if you. Except now we're live and now we're talking about cutting already, and it's like, wow, first thing we're gonna do is cut, huh?
I mean, just wait until you find out about the music I picked.
We'll get there.
No, just kidding. It's not.
Cut that. Just steal jokes. That's what we'll do. We'll just steal jokes and do our best to keep us on track. That's what I was gonna say. Piro his job is literally to keep this whole podcast on track, because if I was left to my devices, I would just talk and make jokes and we would get nowhere.
And nobody wants to listen to a 3-hour podcast. It was just talking mindlessly.
Yeah, who are we that you would want to listen to that?
I mean, I don't know about we. I mean, I feel like I have good things to say, but
I mean, I'm just along for the ride. I feel like I'm just privileged to be able to talk. In today's climate, being a white man and having a voice, very dangerous, you know?
Yeah, well, I think you still need to watch what you say.
What?
All right. There's still a line.
A line?
All right. Yeah.
Oh. I'm white, so I don't wait in lines.
No, you only do them.
Hell yeah. So what's our first topic?
So,
what are we talking about today?
I thought we would just start with the game stuff because I know that's what we're thinking about.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I work full-time and works like 3/4 time. Oh, see, I did it. I told you.
Oh, yeah, you said my name.
And
I'm going to beep it. I'm just beep.
And Poster Ghost works like 3/4 time. So, like, I have a huge commute, so I don't play a ton of games much anymore. I know there's been a few that have been sort of on our radar, repeat customers when it comes to nightly gameplay sessions.
Yeah. Aside, like, I tend to be pretty casual when it comes to gaming these days. Like, I don't play stressful games like Elden Ring, and it's like even getting me to play something like Call of Duty is a task because it takes so much attention and concentration to play.
It's also like you have like a limited amount of time, and like a single session of like Call of Duty might take you 30 minutes. And if you only have X amount of time, you're like, is this really a good way to spend my time, like, getting stressed out, right?
Yeah, not only that, but like you don't win in those games. Like you're not having a satisfying experience, in my opinion. Like some people may like that, but I like, feeling powerful and having my little, power fantasy after work, after I've just been dominated by capitalism for 8 hours.
That's what it feels. 3 shifts a week for 8 hours, huh? It's really,
Yeah, I got that.
really got you to the grindstone, huh?
I got that. Oh, I got that, 20-minute commute. It's pretty bad. I take the back roads because it's more calm than going on the highway.
So if you're expecting to have some Call of Duty or, PUBG or Fortnite or Elden Ring talk, it's very unlikely it's going to be coming from Posterghost, and highly unlikely that it's going to be coming from me. So get ready for the casual corner, which is about the games that we're about to talk about.
It's it's either going to be casual, niche, or like probably a JRPG. I think that's our most in common things that we talk about.
Or it's going to be like the big games, because I try to play the big games, like the AAA titles.
Yeah, that's not
with
as
my limited amount of time.
Not as important to me. Plus, I don't like playing full price for games, so you'll get bargain bin from me for sure.
Oh wait, we can also like, I mean, if you want to like plug your like retro game shit, like I don't know if you're doing it, but
I haven't been in a while.
I mean, talk about that.
I'll talk about it. Yeah, I mean, like so, we never really did like formal intros, but if you search us on Google, I don't know if you'll find anything about Piero. You might find like but I don't know if he's keeping that private. Or
I mean, that seems really homophobic for you to put in the.
All right, fine.
It sounds like you're gonna get canceled. Like I feel like that's like using the R word. Like you can't use the R word.
I can't say.
I feel like that's not okay. I mean,
it's not okay to. Now who's getting canceled?
No, I'm saying it's not okay to like, because you're using it in a derogatory way.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cut that. I have been working on a retro game channel for YouTube, and I have some music on Spotify and YouTube as well. I've been hacking at this entertainment business thing for longer than I'd like to admit.
Like half a lifetime?
At least. Yeah. Unsuccessfully, too. So, real fun.
So it's very good music. It's very...
Yes, it's a shining recommendation from Piero over here.
No, I mean, you like basically shit on yourself.
Yeah, I know.
Like, I've got no success.
Well, maybe they can assume it's because, I don't have a following, or I didn't, put in the legwork there. I could be a diamond in the rough.
Like a lad? You're a lad?
I mean...
And instead of Abu, you have the spider? Like...
That's a pretty creepy Aladdin. I mean, I think that Jafar would have spiders. Am I learning something about myself right now? Making derogatory jokes? Keeping spiders? Am I the baddie? Damn it.
Are we the baddies?
Yeah, are we the baddies? I said your name
skulls
too.
We have skulls on our outfits.
I am wearing... There's a ghost on my shirt right now.
Well, I mean, I feel like we should go with, the one that was on a bunch of people's Game of the Year list, Vampire Survivors, which is the one you've been playing more than like the last few weeks.
Yeah, but I did start...
It was like, you were like, what should I be playing? I was like, why don't you just play Vampire Survivors? And then it was like crack. And then you're like, what are you doing right now?
Every night?
Every day?
Yeah, well, the thing is I also started on the same bullet hell game that I think Piero started on. He might have started on Vampire Survivors first, but he got me hooked on a smaller copy called Rogue Genesia, which we'll get to it eventually, but in my opinion is the superior game. But Vampire Survivors just has been around longer, and it has so much more content that it allowed me to have something to grind at, just have something to do, essentially. And that's what the Bullet Hell game is, right? Or, I'm sorry, Bullet Heaven game is at the end of the day. It's a controller in your hands and some flashing lights and, maybe a few decisions here and there, right?
Well, it feels... I've sort of heard it described more as being more of a Zen game than Rogue Genesia is, because Vampire Survivors really feels difficult only in the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
When you're still building like your basic weapons, like you're building your like whatever you're gonna do to survive. But once you get like in Rogue Genesia, you hit that limit of like, okay, this is just slow, and then you feel pretty powerful, like maybe 4 or 5 minutes in. Whereas I feel like in Vampire Survivors, that limit takes say, somewhere between 10 and 15.
Yeah,
And
that's about right. And I think you failed to mention the dash. The dash makes Rogue Genesia. It's like one of the best added things that makes it feel so much faster and smoother. Because in the beginning of Vampire Survivors, just collecting the gems from the the one or two guys that you're killing with your base one levels weapons is it's tedious. It takes so much, and you're dodging enemies just to get gems to level up. So it's like if you don't hit that curve in the beginning, it makes the rest of the game hard. As opposed to Rogue Genesia, where I feel like the dash mitigates that difficulty.
well, and the thing is like I feel like the rogue light part of Rogue Genesia is more pronounced than the one in Vampire Survivors, because we're talking about the dash, but in the base game, I believe you don't start with the dash. You use the souls tokens that you get to start with more dashes.
Oh, I think you're right.
So
It's just been that long since I played it. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's something we sort of take for granted because like I think I have 5 dashes right now, like starting, and it's hugely different than when you have like 1 or 0,
Yeah,
which is like the thing that frustrates me about Vampire Survivors.
that's a
Like you
big
don't have that feeling of control.
yeah, that's a big part of Vampire Survivors too, though, is investing into the character to get stronger. Like that's kind of like the progression. That's how they can have a limited amount of level variation and still feel like it has progression through those. Is like because by investing in your character, you get to go longer and therefore try newer and better combinations.
Yeah, whereas I think like the challenge in Vampire Survivors has to do with you picking the different characters and having to build a kit based off of that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Rogue Genesia, it's you have so many more abilities that you can pick from, and it's more about building the character that way, but
Mm-hmm.
also like the specific challenges that they give you. Like I know what I was doing one like right before this where you can only pick like 2 weapons,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it makes you think about things very differently where it's like, okay, well maybe I need survivability, what are the best 2 weapons I can get,
Yeah.
and then just sort of going from there. Whereas I think in Vampire Survivors, because there's so many characters, because there's like over 20, right?
There's even more than that. There's a whole secret character thing too.
Yeah, so like when you look at that, it's like okay, and I almost think of it like a MOBA, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
like you can pick any of these characters, but unless you have like a ton of experience, you don't completely understand like, well, what are the best things to start with this? Like,
Right.
when you're playing Dota or League, you pick
You
your starting couple weapons, right?
you need to know what disadvantages using that weapon and what synergies work well with it, so you know how to plan your build as it grows.
And I think that's that whole thing, like the whole thing about these games is like they give you this sense of not only Zen, but like for me, Rogue Genesia really about like seeing all the big numbers, right?
Hmm.
Like trying to build these dumb builds together. Whereas I feel like sometimes Vampire Survivors really feels like before you like starting getting into the like end game, it
Yep.
really feels like it's really about survival, right? Like you're trying to put together a build based on the limited ability they give you to
Hmm. And the limited
manipulate.
choices, because you get more weapons by unlocking more characters. So the more you play, like basically in the beginning you start super specialized. You say, okay, this is my favorite weapon, I know how to build from this, right? And then slowly you start buying more characters, and when you buy that character you also unlock their weapon in the shuffle. So like that's how you kind of grow, and then you're like, oh, this works, and then you're like, oh, I could start with this guy and build this way instead. And then by the end game you get guys who are just broken, so you don't have to worry about that.
Well, I think it lends like it sort of exposes why these games are so good and like how like we're looking at these two games like very differently in terms of what we're getting from them.
i i
That's like
was
the beneficial thing.
I was going to make a point on that. Piro is definitely a gamer. The cyberpunk example is my very favorite example of our play styles. When I play a game, I'm playing it purely for enjoyment and fantasy. And I know for a fact that one of Piro's favorite things to do is try to break the system of a game and pump those numbers as high as he can. And when we played Cyberpunk, he was playing a crazy hacker sniper, and he was like, yeah, I'm doing like fucking, it was like 6 digits of numbers and ridiculous stuff, and I was fighting Smasher with a punching build and saying punch, 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 punch. So that's the difference of the depth of our gaming style.
I mean, it's true. Like we have very different styles, but I think that we both sort of, not to switch topics too quickly, but
Mm.
we both found like different reasons to love, played up, and so we've like dumped 70 hours into these games, like almost all of them multiplayer.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's like the overlapping fun of it for me. The best thing about Played Up is the teamwork. I like working together as a team. People, they probably wouldn't agree with me in saying that. Like me saying that is probably because I just get high and fuck up every time. But the teamwork aspect is one of my favorite parts, and like optimizing it and like trying to figure out like the best way to do something. It's really fun, and that's definitely something that is a big part of Played Up that carries over to the Bullet Heaven games. Like, is the optimization and trying to run it in our best way possible.
Well, and I think it's like, I think in essence it's a lot like, what is it, Unrailed, like where those games are behind like this guise of, oh well, this is just a train game, you're just placing tracks, or this is just a cookie game. But realistically, with these games, it's actually puzzle games.
Yeah.
Like they're puzzle games trying to get things optimized. Like you think about things like, how quickly can I from this place to this place, where is the optimal position for this thing,
Yep.
how can I make it so washing is faster,
How
like
do
can I
we
automate this?
how do we divide the labor most efficiently between the players? Like, I love that kind of stuff. That's, I think, why I like Dota, and I hate Dota, but it's love hate. But I really enjoy the optimization of teamwork between the people. And it's like you have to use. It's also why I like Dungeons and Dragons. It's people's strengths and weaknesses really show in those type of games.
I think that Played Up right now is sort of suffering from the same problem we were kind of talking about with like Rogue Genesia. Like it's not necessarily a lack of content. It's like I get that feeling of the beginning of a Vampire Survivor session where like, okay, well I have to do this bullshit for like 10 minutes before like the game really starts, right? And
Yeah.
the fact that like the higher end items that like increase optimization are sort of gated by the late game
Hmm.
is very frustrating, because like those first, like we do every time, like we just try to max out the first 3 times and we basically have it like on point. Like, okay, well we get the research desk, the plates, we upgrade a sink, like it's always like the same few rounds are the same.
Yeah.
Whereas like you almost want to start, like I understand that we can do like a new game plus with the franchises, but it I I'm fairly certain it still restricts access to the higher end stuff, and it just makes the beginning harder.
And that's exactly what it
Instead of,
does. Yeah.
and so like I think that that's sort of a problem with the game right now, because I want to skip to the end. I mean, if we're gonna use like the D&D sort of analogy that we're talking about, I understand that like levels like 1 through 3 in D&D are fun, right? They can be,
Yep.
but like I feel like it's really fun if you want to have that sense of like danger, right? And like in Plato, right? Like
Hmm.
where if you like try to do something really reckless. But I would rather just be starting at level 3, level 5, and just be like, okay, I can really plan something, build some characters,
Well,
try to get things optimized.
in that same metaphor, I feel like there's not a lot of investment in the beginning. Like 1 through 3, almost 1 to 5. It's like if you fuck up, you're just like, well, let's just start over, or like this isn't gonna work, or if something bad doesn't happen, it's like, well, whatever. It's not like we were on day 10, and it's that same level of investment. I think that gives it worth. So it's like when you're playing those first 3 days, it's literally just like, okay, let's go through the motions. And it's kind of like that with Dungeons and Dragons characters too. The only difference is you have to build character. That's, I think, the only advantage to having a low level Dungeons and Dragons character is you actually have to build that.
When you get to kind of establish like what you want to do over time, as opposed to having to pick a direction like
Hmm.
immediately when you're building a higher level.
Yeah.
We've been on this Played Up, you know, sort of, we've been fiending for it essentially, like just playing it for hours and hours, like on the weekends. But I know for the last few days you've been kind of jonesing for a different kind of Different kind of drug, huh?
Yeah, it's a powerful drug. It's laced with nostalgia, star power, death-defying feats, and it makes me feel like a kid again. A little pretext, like I love to get myself down a YouTube hole. Like most of the time, speaking of Rogue Denusia and casual games that we play, I'm the kind of person who I always have to have something running in the background. There has to be some media playing because the silence is deafening. If there's silence in my room, it's like, oh no, I'm gonna be depressed in a second here.
Like, I need 5 sources of stimulation at one time.
Just to stave away the inner monologue. But yeah, so it's I watch a lot of stuff. I end up in YouTube holes, and it started with boxing. I was watching Mike Tyson stuff. Mike Tyson is the scariest motherfucker in the world. I went into kickboxing, and before I knew it, I ended up on the WWE YouTube channel, and they have been uploading full matches, Royal Rumbles, classics, like, oh, dude. And it has awakened something in me. I love wrestling. I didn't realize how much I loved wrestling. Think about all the video games too. Like, I vividly remember playing the Nintendo 64 wrestling games.
Like I remember the Raw game.
Yeah.
What else? What are the other ones?
The SmackDown
like, I can't remember
games.
all of them, but I do. Yeah, SmackDown. Like,
Yep.
Because what was it? Thursday night was SmackDown.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, and so like just.
Actually, did you know Monday Night Raw is the longest running continuous live television show?
Oh, it's live.
Right? Yeah. Well, I think it's recorded live, but yeah, it is the longest running like television show, like consistently.
I mean, that's really surprising. I mean, I guess it's not because they're making so much money.
So well,
right, and it's essentially theater. It's just like running a TV show.
Exactly. Yeah, I got to see some scripts because I was in my YouTube thing. I tend to go for behind the scenes stuff. Like once I get into something, I'm like, okay, now I need to know how this works. And so I've been looking at a lot of I've been looking at a lot of like behind the scenes stuff, Vice documentaries and mini docs on YouTube. And then I've also been listening to the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast, which is amazing. I don't care what anyone says. Hearing the fucking rattlesnake himself talk about fucking putting Splenda in his coffee is the funniest thing in the world. I love him. But yeah, they talk about how loosely scripted it is because it is a scripted show, but it's loosely scripted. And it's more scripted now, in which I don't really like the modern wrestling. I will admit I have been just watching nothing but nostalgia era wrestling, like the early 2000s, like Attitude Era when The Rock and Stone Cold were really like big into it. And then kind of earlier than that, I like the Andre the Giant, Hulkamania, Macho Man kind of stuff. Because that was just wild. So riddled with drugs and, just ego. And, oh, man, it was wonderful.
And there's so much more like, I'm not saying there's not personality then, but like that was what drew you to the characters. Whereas sometimes I feel like the modern era feels like dinner theater almost.
Yeah.
It's like it's too contrived.
I completely agree. The storylines are almost like a soap opera because that's the whole thing. It's like you try to keep up with something like that and you realize, wow, there's like 3 years of backstory to this character as to why they're acting this way. Yeah, I really haven't been getting much into the context of the fights. I've been just enjoying the showmanship aspect of it. I like the fact that these are essentially stuntmen showing off. One of my favorite, of course, matches, one of the most legendary matches was Undertaker versus Mankind in the Hell in the Cell. And I watched a mini doc on that. And man, it's just like, it really is a feat of endurance and athleticism to do the things that they did. Like Mick Foley, you don't think of him as an athlete, especially like his build and stuff like that. He's like your typical backyard wrestler guy. He gets in it for the pain and he's willing to take the bumps and the falls and stuff like that. But none of that shit was scripted on that Hell in the Cell match. Him getting thrown off the cell was improvised. Him getting thrown through the cell was improvised. They tried to take him off on stretchers twice, and he got off the stretchers twice to keep doing that show. And then when they went, he busted his tooth through his lip. And they stitched him up in the back on Vince McMahon's desk. And Vince McMahon, he was quoted saying, like, Mick Foley was quoted saying, like, what did he say? It was, I appreciated everything you did for this company, everything you just did. but don't ever do anything like that again.
I know that when I've heard like sort of those background discussions, like the thing that always seems to get mentioned the most. I mean, you can see it when you what was the fucking what was the ladies wrestling Glow, like on
Hmm.
Netflix,
Hmm.
and there has to be like a lot of trust between you two, right?
Yeah.
Like to be able to do the improvisation, right?
Hmm.
And you would talk about it, but it's not like I assume they don't completely call audibles, but you I assume you have like ways of telling other people what you're going to do without like saying it directly.
Yeah.
And you can really tell, as especially in that era where it's like it was just so ridiculous, right? Like,
Yeah. People were dying in that area. Like people literally died in wrestling in that era.
so I guess we're gonna see how far Poster Ghost goes down this wrestling hole,
Wrestling
because
hole.
it's only
See, I brought it back. I brought it. I deprivated myself. See,
the wrestling hole.
the wrestling hole. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna go to our next segment, which is essentially our music area. Poster Ghost, like he said, has been making music for a long time, and you know we know that both of us have very different tastes in music.
Mm-hmm.
The way things have sort of shaped over the last 10, 15 years, since we were basically listening to the same music in our like late teens, early 20s.
Yep.
So I thought it'd be good to see what Poster Ghost is listening to, and try to have him bring us an album that maybe it might be good to get exposed to.
So yeah, I definitely love giving less popular artists who I feel deserve a platform. Like I want them to be heard, right? That's super important to me because secretly that's what I am. But I've been one of my favorite composers and guitarist. His name is David Maximikic. The album is called Bilo. I want to say 4. Yeah, Bilo 4. So when he first started, he released an album called Bilo EP. And it was so revolutionary that when I first heard it, I said, no fucking way, this is the future of progressive rock. And in saying that, as an example, there's a song that goes from heavy metal to opera, and then the opera turns into freeform scat. Like, just like it's the most insane stuff in the world, and the fact that it's all bridged together is amazing. He's an Eastern European artist, so he's definitely trained classically. The arts are, and especially music, they're much more focused in Europe, and so you end up with a lot of these really cool prog artists out of European places. But specifically, this album Bilo 4 came out in December of 2022. It's absolutely breathtaking. It's a progressive rock album, so you listen it from start to front, and all the songs will run together. It features an uncountable amount of guitar techniques, from modern ones to flamenco and classical. He plays like at least 3 or 4 different stringed instruments on the album, and then he has people who come in to help him as well, guest singers and people like that. And the album itself, it's like, I don't know how to explain. It's a progressive journey. So it starts with like a modern progressive rock song, and then it fades into like flamenco guitar parts. Like imagine The Last of Us. It's incredibly cinematic, this album.
Like I'm listening to the song that has like the most views
Mm-hmm.
or most plays, and I can hear like that like haunting sort of 80s like rock in it, but I also hear like the polyphia, like the more technical part of it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you can hear the shifts in between everything.
This is dynamically one of the best albums in I've heard in a long time. Like big problem with a lot of modern rock, and especially modern progressive rock, is they lost what kind of gives it its emotion, and it gets so technical that it loses the ability to feel. And you can tell that in the sense that everything is about at the same volume. It's all fucking mixed at the same volume, it has the same gain, and it's loud as fuck, right? In this album, you hear it fade in and out, and not just in the beginning and the end of the song. It has entire movements that fade in and out, and his mastery and control of the composition is what gives it so much power. The guitar and the technicality almost comes secondhand to the way it's written. And to me, that's takes a lot more talent and a lot more maturity as a writer to do than to just go on stage and say, okay, here's 3, 4, 5 minutes of the most insane guitar riffs you've ever heard, you know?
I think for me, the thing that I'm noticing, like, because I'm like just letting it play,
Mm-hmm.
um, is like, like, so I was like an audiophile for quite a while. I spent a lot of money on like headphones and not audio interfaces, but like amps and stuff like that for like headphones specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be the headphones, but like I'm sort of surprised at how really clear the music is.
Yeah.
Because I'm used to it not like it's, for one reason or another, like they're being like just, I don't want to say disrespectful. You probably have the better, whatever term. It's probably better. But like, it just not being clean.
It's almost as if the tracks aren't separate. It all mushes together.
Well, and that might be, one person writing all of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus like a band where everybody works together.
Right.
Even though one person may write all the music, but you can tell that it's like one person sort of directing everything.
Yeah, I think that's part of the power too. Is he has so much of his life in this album. I mean, if you look at the album cover, it's of a pregnant woman, right, or an abstract art of a pregnant woman. When he was writing this album, his wife was pregnant, and he had his, I want to say, first or second child, but all of those themes are very present in the album. There's a lot of life to it. He took a long time to write this album, and you can tell like, when a band is in like in a studio and they're like, okay, you got a year to write a new album, you got to pump this album out, right? It's all very thematic to like things that they want to put out as an image. Whereas I feel like Bilo, especially this Bilo, is incredibly personal. Like it's almost like looking into someone's diary in the form of music.
I mean, I could tell you right now that I already added it to a playlist. So
wow, that's actually impressive. So just a little context there. Normally, the stuff I show he is not very interested in because it is a lot of the opposite stuff. I'm a music major, so it's really easy for me to be like, oh, this is a really intriguing chord progression or intriguing technique that I've heard musically, but then have it come off to someone else being like, well, this is obnoxious.
For me, I can understand like the art of it, like why it's good. Like I can understand the technicality, but it also not be enough for me as, as a layman to like realistically just be listening to, in the car.
Right.
Like I think part of the reason I think I can listen to this is because there haven't been lyrics yet. If there are, but like I think that makes it easier to listen to. So it's not getting muddled up.
Right. It's
the way sometimes lyrics do.
I feel like, so I listen to a lot of instrumental music, and lyrics for me are tough because it's like, you have this really abstract art, and then you take one of the most like defining things, words, and you throw it on top of it, and all of a sudden that art becomes what the words are instead of the other way around, right? Like obviously the music is going to influence the words and the mood of it, but when it comes down to it, that's the first thing you're going to lock in and listen to. And this album does have a few songs with words in it, but in all honesty, I think they're the weakest ones in the album.
Like it's like they just added it on top.
That's like, kind of what it's because the singer is one he worked with in the previous Bilos, so it's almost as if he had to include him.
Like almost like it was forced.
Yeah. Because I feel like this album was so strong, and then you hear the one singing and you're like, oh man, like, because another problem with the singing is you have to rely on a certain type of structure to create lyricism, right? Like a sort of repetitive structure. And it kind of, I feel like it's restrictive to his creativity. I think
like not having it be one vision anymore. Like you feel like you have to go out of your way.
Yes, to accommodate this structure that existed outside of the vision.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I could talk about Bilo for another 30 minutes. I honestly think it's one of the greatest progressive rock albums that's ever been written. And I think it's some of the best composition that's ever been written. There's a song in there. I couldn't tell you. I listened to the song the album beginning to end. So sometimes the songs get muddled for me. I think the song is called Away. I'm not completely positive on this. But there's a song in there that has no guitar. It's literally strings, horns, piano, and it's a waltz. and it's one of the most beautiful modern compositions I've ever heard. Like it stands up to like Mozart level compositions in my opinion. It's more dynamic than romantic or Renaissance era music because it has so much influence from the modern era. Like it's amazing.
I mean, like I'm looking at his profile right now. I mean, he has 100,000 monthly listeners, which isn't like, but I know that you're not getting paid that much for
Yeah.
100,000 Spotify.
He doesn't do any he doesn't well, I saw him on tour once. I've only seen him in the States once. But he doesn't do vinyls, he doesn't do CDs, like he doesn't do any merch, and it's because it's like a passion project for him. He's like after he did this album, I think he's taking a break from music to raise his family. So
Is this his like primary career?
I don't know. I know I'd have to look that up. As far as I know, this is all he does.
Oh, okay.
I think he's a music major too. I could be wrong on that though.
Like, so you said you said Middle Eastern? Is that what you
No,
said?
Eastern
What's it called?
European, I want to say.
Eastern European.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, like how old is he? Like,
He's
has he been working on this for a long time?
well, he's younger than you'd think he is because he came out actually pretty I want to say I found him recently, like within the past 5 years. So hang on, let me go to his page here. His first album came out on it was Bilo. Oh, he doesn't have all of them on here, but he has Bilo 2 because he started pulling some of his other stuff. But Bilo 2 is back in 2012, and I came aware of
Oh, so
him.
it's still a while.
I became aware of him at Bilo 3 though, but it was like right before Who Bit the Moon came out, so probably like 2015, 2016 is when I became aware of him. And I think I saw him in concert. That was a while ago. That must have been. It was right after or right before I broke my ankles. So that was what 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's like a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been a while. But yeah, we were eagerly awaiting Bilo 4 because the album that came before it, Who Bit the Moon, was a really amazing like cinematic guitar masterpiece too. So you're just like oh my god, I need more from this guy. That was what I thought anyway. So I need to hear what this guy comes up with next.
And have you seen a progression over time?
Oh yeah, it's really cool too because the way he did the Bilo albums, you have Bilo 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? And the first one is an EP if you can find it, and it's really rough. It's like you can tell it doesn't exist in the same stratosphere, but it shows the potential of what he could become, right? And then you hit Bilo 3, and all of a sudden he's guesting these really big people on, and like he's like kind of making his name in the industry as a progressive rock artist. And then after he like was like made that I want to say like a monument, like after he made that like what's the word I'm looking for? Not parapet, monument. Like he made that climb, right? Like after he planted his flag, that's when he knew he could act creatively. And that's when he put out Who Bit the Moon, which had like no heavy parts, like, you know, like no whittles, no chugging, but it had like cinematic piano interludes and like violin swells and like everything that I think made it so great and unique and really showed off that he was beyond just a guitar player, right? And then Bilo 4 was a combination of both of those things.
So you can, so it seems like he's really transcending like his own music at this point, right?
Oh,
Like he's actually still growing as an artist.
I completely agree. He completely transcended out of because like there's like your levels like Polyphia, right? Like Polyphia is they're a touring band, they're sold out, but their music, sorry to say it, doesn't have a lot of depth. And then you go up one more tier, right? And this is going to be sound like people are going to be mad that I'm going to say this, but you have like Animals as leaders, right? They're the ones who pioneered all of the techniques. And so the depth comes from his ingenuity, you know, the fact that he created this. So when you're hearing it, you're like, oh, that's a progenitor of all of the stuff that we're hearing now, right? And then one tier above that are the people that use those techniques, but then take it a step further, which are people like David Maximykic. I don't even think Animals as Leaders does that because they stick too hard to the progressive metal format. Like I need to make something that's palatable that will not necessarily get radio play, but like will be listened by the gent group or the, something like that. The metal groups, essentially. It has to be heavy.
Do you feel like some of the more commercial bands are like, because like I hear the techniques in the songs, right?
Hmm.
Do you think that some of those bands like find a technique or like some, whether we say genre or style, and then just stick to that because that's what's made them commercially successful and don't try to innovate their sound at all because it's risky?
I think that's exactly what happens, actually. I don't think it's that they don't want to innovate or they don't think they're innovating, but I would definitely agree with that. Some people, they find a niche and they stick to it. And I don't think there's anything
Well, I mean,
wrong with that either. I think there's definitely a market for that, and there's definitely something to be said about finding your genre because I've yet to find mine. I think, so as a musician, I think when you reach a certain point of playing, right, it's hard to stick to one thing because you want to do everything. You're like, how can I just do this one thing over and over and over again in different variations when I could do so many different kinds of things?
well, I think that's sort of a reflection of like us getting older in general too. Like think about like how much we were influenced by each other or the radio
Hmm.
or video games, for music, whereas now like I haven't listened to the radio in forever, and
Yeah.
my tastes are basically dictated by how I'm feeling and like sort of using the radio function Spotify to generate playlists from the music I'm already listening to.
Hmm.
It's sort of just guided that way instead of it being like I have to. I mean, if we want to sort of use the analogy of this album in general, right? Like we're looking for the music for us. We're not looking for the music that helps us relate to everybody else.
I think, well, that's also the way that we ingest music now. The way that music is given to us, it's different, right? Like, and I think a band, you've probably heard the band Thrice, but they called it a digital sea. And we choose where we want to fish.
Hmm. Well, I think you can see that from like when we started in like even in like Pandora, right?
Hmm.
Like having to discover artists through Pandora, and like Spotify is just a much better version of that, right? In terms of exposing you to different sources.
Right. Or
I,
more
I mean, I
personalized
know you're on
sources.
like, I know you're like on like Reddit message boards and all that stuff, so you're getting
Hmm.
like exposed different ways. But like this is primarily how it is for me, and Spotify has just become radio, right?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, although I do get some of my recommendations through, like, I would say it's like 75/25. Like 75% of my music is found through my Discover Weekly at this point. And then the other 25% is either through live shows or recommendations or other algorithms such as YouTube, Reddit, and things like that. But it does create almost it's kind of the same effect that social media has, where we end up in echo chambers, but it's like an echo chamber of our own music, and it makes it you kind of get into pockets where it's like, oh man, like I'm moving further and further away from this, so it's like harder to listen to something like this, right?
Well, and then it becomes, I mean, at least in my experience, it feels like a pendulum sometimes, right? Where
Yeah.
you go way too far. And like, I think about it like when I was listening to like more technical music, you're trying to appreciate it more. And then
Yep.
it's like, you go too far and you're like, I need something simple. And like, that's when I like shifted like way back to lo-fi, right? Because it's
Hmm.
very simple, not complex. I can just listen to it. It's easy. I don't have to pay attention to it. But I find myself now like starting to swing back the other direction, like looking for more complexity, and
Hmm.
whether it's lyrics, like the music composition, I can see myself shifting back the other direction. Maybe not necessarily what you would listen to, but
Right.
I know that like my tastes will like waver, like not. And I said to myself like it's very much dictated by my like how I'm feeling, my emotions, like what I want to listen to.
Like, is
But
it? So I have a question about that. Then, do you tend to want to amplify your current emotions, or like are you trying to antagonize the emotion that you're having, or are you trying to like resolve it?
so at I would say if we had had this conversation, 15, 20 years ago, it was about amplifying the emotion.
Yeah.
But now I'm way more aware of it.
Hmm.
And so, like, I've been going through some shit for like the past like 2 months. And I understand that keeping those songs will keep the emotion there.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, if I don't want that to happen, I need to not listen to this music. And I bet our Spotify's look very different because like my Spotify literally has dates in it where like I start a new playlist and if I go back because I have it like all the way back to like 2016,
Nice.
like
Yeah.
I can tell exactly what was going on in my life when
Hmm.
these songs were there based off of like sort of the thematic elements.
But you know what's really
And so,
crazy about that, just like a side note, is I've read a really good book about neuroscience and music, and that's exactly how music works in the brain. Music will attach itself, like, or at least the things that make music attractive to the human brain, it happens between synapses. And so essentially, when a synapse fires to another, like when you make that connection in your brain, the space in between those connections is where music occupies. And so you're and when you listen to that music, it literally reactivates those connections.
I literally have a music psychology book on my bed right now.
Oh, nice. Hell yeah.
It's Musicophilia
Uh-huh.
by Oliver Sacks.
Nice.
This book's like 15 years old, but it like talks about like how uh, it really reflects on. I bought it like a couple weeks ago, but I haven't started really reading it.
Uh,
Um, but yeah, I understand that more about me. And like when I was looking, not to get ahead of ourselves, but the next section is going to be about music that I'm listening to and sort of having Poster go sort of reflect on what these songs are. But I could tell that like, oh, okay, I can tell exactly where I was emotionally like when I was picking these songs. The specific example I can think of is like there's a playlist like it's probably from 3 or 4 years ago that I have where I can pinpoint exactly when like my grandma died
yeah.
because like, the music drastically changed like in the middle of the playlist.
It was like he was
And
listening to like Dragon Force, and then it immediately was like, all right, we're going to the used. These.
no, no, I mean it wasn't that, but
No, no,
like
I
it
know.
was way more emotional. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, we're having a good time then, and it's like, oh no, we're having a very bad time now. I think with you, you're definitely looking at the complexity and the art of it, and
Hmm.
for me, I'm really looking at something that resonates with me.
Hmm.
And I think when it's instrumental, it's very different because it's the implied emotion,
Yep.
right? And a lot of times like I need the lyrics to really resonate, but that's also a problem, right?
Hmm.
Because if lyrics don't resonate with me, I tend not to like the song. Like
Right.
if the lyrics do shit or something like that, I won't listen to it. But if the music is good enough or affects me that much, I can do away with that. But it's about balance, right?
Hmm. Well, I think it's interesting to say that, like, um, for you, it's like a personal emotional journey. It's like almost like putting timestamps on different parts of your life, right? Whereas mine, it's more of an artistic or learning journey. You can tell the music I'm listening to depends exactly on where my skill level is or what I'm interested in learning about music. Like you were saying, you're swinging like a pendulum, and I kind of do that too, except like I swing into stuff like right now I'm listening to a guy named Ken Matsumaru, and he's a free jazz saxophone player, and it's like unlistenable. It does not sound like music. It cannot define someone's emotion, like, but I also don't think I'll be listening to it in my next month's playlist, but it's something that I'm interested in now. But I really like that you have kept all of those dated playlists for as long as you did, because I literally just started doing this. Like mine say 12, 122, 120, 23, and before that it's all hodgepodge.
I think it helped, like, because I'm very much like a control freak, and having that organization, being able to look at music because music has influenced so much of my life. Not,
Hmm.
I've never played an instrument, and but it's like that ability to resonate with my emotions, get what's it called, vision from music
Hmm.
is is something that's like really been part of my life for a long time,
Well, I
and
bet it's grounding for you too. Like when you feel as if uh, not to be like, to get what's the word I'm looking for, like philosophical about how music is, like when you have that resonance with another musician, someone who you've never met, never, don't have any sort of commonality with, and then all of a sudden you hear a song and you're like, holy shit, like this is how I feel, or like I think that's a really powerful note of music.
You mean the first time we heard Escape the Fate? Like when we were like
Situation.
early 2013?
It was perfect. The voice, the swagger, it was everything we needed. That's
It's like I can appreciate that those songs are a reflection of who I was then,
yeah,
right? Like if it's a journey.
totally, yeah.
Whereas now, like I know that there are songs that we look back and it's like really cringy, right? Like you're like, I can't believe I listened to this.
Like
But it's
Escape
like,
the Fate's a little bit like that for me, I'm sorry to say.
but like my thing is like at one point,
Yeah.
this is exactly what I needed,
Yes, I
right?
completely agree. Yep.
And and it sort of sets the tone. Like I think about it like in terms of my spiritual, psychological, emotional journey that like establishing these points also shows me that these periods in my life where things are not good or really good can be really discreet,
Yeah.
right? Like that they're not going to last forever. It helps me keep perspective.
Hmm.
So like I've my playlist sometimes, it's 3 4 months. One time it was like 6 or 7 months, but I've also had playlists as short as like 2 weeks,
Right.
where it's like something dramatically changes and this just isn't the music I want to listen to anymore.
Interesting, yeah.
And so like that's more what I've learned through Spotify. And like if realistically, if you're not paying for Spotify, just pay for Spotify.
Oh my
But
god. Not to shill or anything like that. And I'm a musician and I know the fucking, oh, Spotify doesn't pay. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to the music industry in the world and all this stuff like that. But it's given a lot of artists who haven't had a chance. Like, think about how much of a paywall there has always been with music, right? You have to do your equipment, you have to pay to tour, and then once you do that, you have to find a record label. And then the only way to get mass distribution of your music is to work with that record label because they're the only people who can produce and then distribute those records, right? With Spotify, it completely eliminated all of that. And of course, there are things like SoundCloud and
Bandcamp.
Bandcamp and things like that where you can share your music and take more of a profit for the artist. But we live in a society. I hate to say it,
like this is the system that's in place, right? Like I'm not saying it's the best system, but like you said, it's giving people a platform who would have
it's the same.
drowned out in the echo chamber, right?
It's the same thing at Twitter. It's kind of like we all hate Twitter, right? But can you at a celebrity or someone or a business anywhere else and get a response? And not only that, have it be in a public forum where other people can see it, right? It's the same thing with Spotify. It's like, do you want to like get your music heard and have it in a place that's accessible? That's what it is.
Well, I think that's sort of like a good transition for like our next little segment, because like both of the so what we're gonna do is I've picked two songs that I've had time to pick out these songs,
Mm-hmm.
but in the future we're gonna do basically songs that I've added in the last week or so. But both of these artists like are not huge artists.
Yeah.
Um like I have a few of the songs for one of the artists, but the other one, like I only have a single song. And it's like this is like I found these through Discover Weekly or through um like just using the radio function.
Are we talking like less than 50,000 listeners, like, or like way less than David Maxim, right?
So one of them has less than 16,000 monthly listeners, and the other one had less than 88,000.
Well, yeah, that's still pretty underground, if you ask me.
Well, and it's like I know how I got exposed to one of them, which was through like D&D playlists of me trying to find songs to fit. Like, we play D&D, we brought it up before, and it's like music, because it's important to me, is important to set the stage for like big moments.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I tend to pick music for specific situations. And I think that this is how I got exposed to some of these artists. But this is also my opportunity to try to fuck with posterghost to see like these two songs and have him listen and like be like, basically ask the question, why do I like these songs and why do I like both of these songs, right? What is that saying?
Like, what are the commonalities? What draws you to this style of music, or what what's in, I guess, like what characteristics of it are appealing.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to jump on the back of, oh, I'm very emotional about my music, so it's easy to go that way and reflect it that way.
Yeah.
But there are still things about the songs other than that, than how they make me feel. Because like, you know, I could be listening, like you said, I could be listening to the Used or something like that, and that's not going to cut it, right?
Hmm.
Like there are things about these songs that are resonating with me. Like you can go that way, or you can go like, what is it specifically about what these artists are doing that makes me like be drawn to the music,
Well,
right?
I think that's what's interesting about showing someone, like if you have a personal connection with something and you show it to someone else, you break that existential barrier, right? And all of a sudden you have a second objective viewpoint as to what makes the song good or bad, right? And our different styles of listening, I think, is going to complement that really well.
So, I mean, we're gonna jump into it. Or the way we're gonna do it is I'm gonna send the links to Poster Ghost, and he's gonna listen to them. We'll post the links in the video just so you can know the songs.
And we'll let you know
Pick
when they
two,
start too. We'll do a beep or something.
and you can follow along. Okay, I'm gonna send you the first one right now.
Okay. Oh man. That is one hell
So
of
the
an
first
album
song,
cover. Like the first, so if you want first reactions, right? The song is called Chinese Warlord. It is by a band called Error 37. And the album art is incredibly colorful, but it looks like it was done in MS Paint. Is this the underground? Is this the 1600 or is this the 80?
this no, this is a 16,000.
Okay, that's what I would.
They have more views on this video. This video has 36,000 views, but the song is also over 2 years old.
Okay. I mean, my songs are over 10 years old and they have 100 views.
Ooh,
So good for
ooh,
him. Good for him and his MS Paint.
ooh.
Anyway, it has 3 pixel hearts, and I heard the first 2 seconds. I know it's going to be more electronic than the rest. All right.
Okay, okay. Let me know when you're playing it so I can listen to it too.
Okay, I'm going to count down and starting Chinese Warlord in 3, 2, 1. Well, I tell you right now, it's a blend of a lot of stuff. There's a lot going on. My first thoughts are like 303 and Enter Shikari, but then it drops
Hmm.
into a pop punk chorus.
And then it just went post hardcore.
Yeah, but the synth work makes me think of early post hardcore. Oh, then we got bass drops.
Yeah,
Wow, there's a lot going on. I like the synth there.
I think part of it like is the contrast between like the simplicity in the background and like the tones they're using
Hmm.
relative to like the vocal.
Yeah, it's consistent. Like on the, it stays consistent on the snare even when it's getting chaotic. Doot 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 doot. That motif in the back is like it's like baby's first riff. But I think it's supposed to be like that. Like that's the thematic thing to almost like the post-hardcore pop punk sound.
Hmm. Well, I think it sort of all fits based off of like this album art, right? Like you're like, I get it now, right? Where it's like super childlike and super chaotic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Like, because you could totally see this art on a T-shirt, right, at a festival.
yeah. Oh, dude, totally. It's like I can see him like two-stepping on stage and like, yeah, it's like you can see. I see this album. Like I can see them performing. Like I know exactly what era it could belong to. When was this made? This was made 2 years ago. 2021. That's wild. There's such a resurgence for this kind of stuff right now. It's insane.
Well, and I think it's like sort of that second coming. Like, I mean, what Fall Out Boy just made another song, right? And
Yeah.
it's like there's a market for it now, right? Like the people who are listening to those music as teenagers have money now.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Which is kind of funny because it's you have to ask yourself, is this the new dad rock?
I mean, I think it is.
You do? Yeah. I don't disagree with you actually.
Well, I mean, I think we go down those rabbit holes sometimes, right? Where you listen to that music, right? Again,
Oh yeah.
and look on it fondly as a relic of the time period.
I said the Used earlier because that's definitely one of my go-tos for like that era of music. And I think like the incredibly dining like the biggest defining characteristic of that style of music is the vocals, and more specifically the vocal accentuations, like the gus and the I don't know what you'd call that. Like it's like the scooping sound, but it's like the skater voice, I would call it.
Mhm. I see. I think this sort of like you brought up that point, and it makes me think of because it was MCR, right?
Yep.
It's gonna autoplay the next song.
Oh, I paused it already. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the MCR, when they brought out that new song, it seems so derivative and it seemed to not innovate at all. Where I think that the people who are going to make the resurgence are going to be the ones who still innovate without just trying to be nostalgic.
Okay, so what this Era 37 is incredibly derivative, and I don't think it's negatively derivative. I think it's derivative in the sense of an homage, like derivative in the sense that only a younger group imitating an older style could deliver it with energy like this. Does that make sense to you?
Mhm.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
like there's no way MCR or a band like that could keep making music like this with the same intensity, I don't think, because just their age. It's not bad music. It's not necessarily something I would listen to, and it's not um innovate. Oh, that's what I was going to say. It's not innovative in the sense that it's something new. Um, it's innovative in the sense that it's combining old things into something new. It's very postmodern, but it's really hard to get away from that now too. I think there's a new
Because so
genre.
many things have been done before.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And it's like even if you listen to older music, like when it was first starting, all they're doing is taking pieces of different kinds of music too, like R&B turning into blues and rock and roll and all that kind of stuff. It's all derivative of something else, you know. But there's another genre of music that's a lot like this called hyperpop, and my buddy Greg, who I was in his studio recently in California. He showed me some of this stuff, and I was like, "Oh, this is where that kind of sound is moving to," and it's that angsty teenage sound, but it has an influence of hip hop in it, and so it's like imagine pop punk but electronic.
Mhm.
Back to Basics featuring Angelus in 3, 2, 1, play.
Yeah, you got the 8-bitty like synth part of it.
But it's less driven by the metal and aspect and more driven by the hip hop and pop aspect, I feel like. More 303, you know?
Oh yeah, it has more of the cry
Mm-hmm.
effect.
But you hear the similarities, right?
Yeah, like this feels way more poppy.
Way more modern, right? It's got like the hip hop kind of vocals, but then super poppy backs.
I almost feel like this song wouldn't be able to make it on the radio.
I don't think it would either. But that's the thing. All of our music wasn't on the radio in the beginning either. It's a lot like 303.
Yeah, like it 100%.
Yeah.
Like just like the singing style, like the like kiddie version, like the lack of complexity in the music.
Yep.
Oh, okay. He said anime like 3 times.
Yeah, that's how you know. Anime's cool now. Well, I mean, if you're underground, you watch anime.
I was like, this sounds like an anime intro. Like if you took off the vocals.
Exactly, right? It's really funny how much that has crossed over into culture now. Like, I remember being a kid, and I mean, not in the defense of the other people making fun of me, I did wear trip pants and I was a fucking menace. But I just remember people looking back at me in disgust and being like, you watch those Japanese cartoons? Now we're here.
Now everybody watches them.
Yeah.
And like you don't want to gatekeep because you want to be inclusive.
I'm gonna gatekeep so hard, Zach. Anyone even mentions a second season of Fully Cooler to me.
Well, I added that song to my playlist, so
that's a cool one, right? It's different. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too far off topic because we're going to have more opportunities to speak on it, I think. But
yeah.
What's the second song you wanted to send me?
Okay, so my whole point was to try to give Poster Ghost like 2 songs that are very, very different. And the whole goal is to try to get him to figure out why I like.
Oh, I can already tell this is gonna be way, way different. Like if you just look at the 2 difference in the what's it called, the album covers. I can guarantee you I'm going to enjoy this a lot more. This is just where I'm at musically. I can already tell. I heard one piano note in the beginning. I was like, oh, this is going to be beautiful. So it's called A Million Dreams, called by Florian Burr. I'm assuming Florian Burr is the name of the artist, not the name of his
I believe the
band.
album is A Million Dreams and the song is called I Remember.
Okay, yeah, I remember. Okay, 248. It's all lowercase, so there's a good chance we might end up in a lo-fi zone. Okay. We're playing I Remember in 3, 2, 1, play. So it's a 1, 2, 3. Well, it's a 3-chord progression. I couldn't tell you what chords. I'm not that far yet. So both songs, the first similarity I notice is this one sounds like a music box. Like it's piano, but in the way it's playing, it makes me think of like a lullaby or a music box, right? And so the first thing I notice about is that almost childlike intent to both songs. Let's just let this one keep going though. This is really nice. I mean, it's beautiful.
So, so this is actually the song that I played after you guys left Camelot in our D&D campaign.
Huh.
Like when you guys were on the boat.
Oh, like kind of almost looking back and forward at the same time. It's like it's almost like I could get really philosophical. This kind of music, I love this kind of music. So it's like carrying what you had before with you into the future.
Yeah, it was very much about like you guys remembering what had happened, but taking that with you.
Hmm.
right? Giving you a reason to keep pushing forward, right? Like it's more like a somber feeling, right? Than like to feel devastated by
Hmm.
what had happened.
There's definitely a tinge of sadness in it, but I feel like the sadness is what gives way to the hope. Like you couldn't have hope without sadness, right? And there's definitely a hopefulness to that song. Oh, that's how it resolves. I thought I was gonna keep going. Man, that was nice. So I would definitely give that a second and third listen. um, that was I mean the song itself is beautiful. It's concise. Um, it's not complicated as it's definitely um, sounds more complicated than the other song. But honestly, the other song had a lot more going on musically than this one did. But I don't think it takes a lot to put forward an emotion. Like, oh man, like this music is so much harder to analyze and apply a concrete description and like, oh, this is where it sits, this is how it exists, uh, because it is more personal. Like, it's a single artist. He's it's a single instrument. There's no one else writing with it. It doesn't. He's probably not writing it for anyone. Like so. Um, if anyone he is writing it for, it's I don't know. It doesn't. It's not complicated. So he's not like showing off technique. He's just writing a really beautiful movement within that simple chord progression. And I think there's something to be said about that. I think that's what gives it its nostalgic innocence, is because the chord progression isn't uncommon. That da 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 da. You know, like you hear that all the time, but it's the personal connection to the music that gives it its power.
I mean, in the same way we were talking about the album you shared, like it's you can tell that it's way more about capturing an emotion,
Yeah.
right? Like in terms of the way we're describing things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's that like not the interpretation um with like such simplicity, I think is what sort of draws us to it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I definitely get like the lo-fi part of it, but I think that it's like it's something about the simplicity, almost like a poem, right? Like you can
Mm-hmm.
capture so much emotion and like with so few words, right?
Yeah.
With and in this instance we're talking about like so few notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the second song is like what 35%, 30% longer than this song.
Yeah.
I really like the artist in general because there's a lot of songs that I have by the artist
Mm-hmm.
in in my D&D folder specifically, and but I have songs on my playlist, and it's just something about being able to like isolate, right? Like I would listen to music like this, lights off, just headphones on,
Mm-hmm.
like, and just really experiencing it. Whereas like the other song, I feel like I'm not doing that.
Yes.
Like I'm way more listening to it as something to drive me, not to calm,
I
right?
completely agree. It's the experience and the act of listening can be drastically different depending on what you're listening to. Like listening and analyzing this song takes a lot more focus to do so because it's not necessarily driven by a vocal or a riff or a sound, right? It's existing within something that has already been well defined, a piano solo song, right? Like there's a million piano solo songs out there. And therefore, in order to carve a niche within that, or in order to figure out what makes the song tick within that, it becomes more either about what the person is trying to write or the specific decisions of notes that exist within it, you know? Because the song itself, like, right, it starts with that really simple chord progression that, like, do, 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 right? And then immediately after that, he starts putting those crescending up, descending arpeggios in it, right? Which gives it this, like, it's like, um, almost like a beautiful descension. And it makes you, it pull, what it does is it pulls up. So it goes down, but it pulls up because the more it keeps going down, the more you have an expectation of it going up, right? And so you create
Mhm.
this expectation within yourself that says, "Oh, this needs to go up. This needs to go up. I want this to be happier. I want this to be hopeful." Right?
I think that you're really capturing like what I was trying to throw at you guys
Mm-hmm.
when we were doing that session, because like I know, okay, a little bit backstory for everybody else. We're doing a Curse of Strahd campaign, but I've inserted like them traveling to other time periods as part of it, like because I can't keep things simple. And so prior to me playing this song while they were sort of decompressing after what had happened, they had lost like more than they had before.
Hmm.
And it's like you've never been lower, but it's like you're having to carry that hope knowing that things can get so much better if you're this low right now, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just hoping that things get even better.
Hmm.
And they didn't really when you got back, but there I think that there's still hope that you guys can change things, right? And I think that's what about this song. Like when I think of listening to the song the same way we listen to the artist you suggested, as opposed to the other song where we were like, we're just trying to pick things out that they're doing, right? Like
Hmm.
it's not, it doesn't seem as cohesive. And like it, whereas this, it's like the other song feels like a blunderbuss, right? Like you're just trying to fire everything at once, right? Whereas
Yes.
this song definitely feels like, this is an error, right? Like it is direct, it is exactly, it's trying to accomplish that thing,
Hmm.
right? And I think that I think it's that contrast about like these two different ways that I can appreciate both of these songs,
Hmm.
right? And for very different reasons. And it's about like having that complexity in your repertoire music that you listen to, right?
Yeah.
Like that we're the albums that we listen to or the artists might be more one dimensional. Like I'm not saying in terms of like their ability to make music, but like they typically exist within range, right?
Right. Well, it's
And
like the intention. Like, why did you make this music, or who did you make it for? Right.
whereas when we think about ourselves, right, we think about all of the artists that we like, that sort of that assemblage of music tastes that really establish us and make us different than any other person,
Hmm.
right? And so I think the belief that, any person that you see, whether they're wearing a fucking Led Zeppelin t-shirt or goddamn, what are kids listening to right now?
Trippy Red. I got one.
Okay. Okay. Or should be red shirt, right? Like, that they're more complex than that, right?
Right.
Like that there's more music that they listen to. And I think I think the belief that, I mean, especially when we're in like high school, right? Like you're like, oh, they only listen to this kind of music. You realize that like nobody was like that,
Yeah.
right? We all listen to like very different things. I was listening to orchestral and instrumental stuff in high school.
I think there's
And
a point in here too about the first song to the second song, right? Like the second song is universal, to whereas the first song, not everyone's gonna like.
I think that that's sort of what I was trying to do. I wanted to like throw like a wrench in it,
Hmm.
just be like, okay, this is something ridiculous. Like this is not like, not that I'm going to say it's bad music,
Right.
but like I know it's not good music, right? Like it is, like I said before, like sometimes you listen to songs is exactly what you need. Whereas this song, I've listened to this song off and on for years.
You can't. Here's the thing: you can't eat vegetables all the time. Sometimes you need a piece of candy. I think that's the way you got to think of it. It's like no one can survive off mashed potatoes.
It's a palate cleanser
Yeah.
too, right? Like I'm sure you do that too, right? Like where you listen to the music that you norm like way more complex stuff. But I think that a lot of times you have to take the step back, and that's when you listen to more orchestral music, right?
Hmm.
Classical type music,
Hmm.
right? Because it acts like a palate cleanser. You're like, okay, well, this is not that it's completely different, but it like puts your mind in a different space to be thinking about like the music, really interpreting it.
Yeah.
Even though they're like both of the like I said, like both of these artists and the one this artist and the one you suggested, like it's very much telling a story, but it's like doing it in very different ways, right? With
Hmm.
different instruments.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think another thing that's interesting about the first song is it not only tells its story with its music, it tells its story with its modality and its form. Like there's a certain level of character that exists in just the character of the music, right? Whereas
Ooh.
the piano song, it's harder to develop that character. Like I listened to the first song, I'm like, oh, these are probably four kids, who put together an album, listened to this and that, and then started, doing this, right? But when I listen to the piano song, I'm like, who is this man? Why does he think this way? All of that stuff,
Like we kind of said before, we were talking about bands in general, right? When you have more, I mean, essentially cooks in the kitchen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Want to go back to Plato.
Yeah.
The more cooks in the kitchen, it's harder to send that kind of message, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in the same way you said about the art, I keep saying the artist using just because I can't remember his name. Like you said that like when they had to force in like the singing part of it, it like felt different.
Yeah.
Right? Like it didn't have, like you said, they seemed like the weakest songs on the album.
It broke the intention of the album.
And I think you can see that, right? Where like you said, I mean, like I was saying, right? One of them feels like a blunderbuss, a cannon, right? Whereas the other one definitely feels more precise, like
It's a
more
feather.
attention.
Yeah. It's definitely different. It's exactly you're right in saying that they were definitely very different songs. Almost complete opposite, if you ask me.
That was my contribution to the music. Just I think it's harder for me to engage with what Poster Ghost is saying with the music he's listening to, and I'm trying to facilitate the conversation more. But this is like when it's me, it's much more personal. I can talk about it more. But
I think opening up the room for dialogue like this actually doesn't happen as much as you think it does. A lot of people never ever discuss the songs that they listen to. And I think it's funny that you assume everyone listens to classical music, because I know for a fact that there are people who never hear an instrumental song in their life. They only listen to what comes on the radio. They only listen to pop music. And it's no fault of their own. It takes a certain want of exploration to develop your music tastes,
well, I think it has to do with how we look at the music,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like think about what you and I say we're listening to the music, right? Like I'm listening to have an emotional reaction, have some sort of emotional connection. Like not to say you're not doing this, but like
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at complexity, you're looking at like
Well,
technique, that kind of stuff. Whereas
I,
other people, I don't know.
yeah. Well, not only that, just to say, like, not looking for, like, my emotional connection does come from complexity. There's a certain level of emotional connection that happens from me hearing something that goes, oh my God, that was insane, or like, that was impressive. That's a different level of emotional connection that I seek that other people don't. I'm all about putting on a song to create a mood, but my modus operandi for searching in music is like, how did the artist use the tools? And by tools, I mean compositional tools, instruments, and mastering to create this product. And I think that to me is emotional, because it's the same journey I'm on. It's like I look at what someone else makes and I say, wow, how did they get there? Like, what led them to not only have the knowledge but also the drive to put something out like that?
Wow, that was a lot. That conversation went so much further than I expected it to.
You're supposed to
I
keep things
know.
under control. What happened?
Well, I thought that it was more useful to keep things going than to cut things off, but it seems like that part worked out. I know we're still trying to iron out the wrinkles in what we're doing, but we're going to try to add some different parts of content. I think it was easier to cut some things off than others. I mean, you guys could tell we planned for 35, 45 minutes maybe, and then, we were at an hour and a half with that last one.
Yeah, it's
So,
before any cutting, but I doubt I'll be able to get it down to 45 minutes. This is going to be an hour podcast easy.
so I mean, I hope you guys liked what you heard. I mean, if you're in it, I mean, you can look up Poster Ghost stuff on YouTube and Spotify. I don't really put out content anymore. I don't really stream
You,
much anymore.
you used to be on, well, you're on Twitch as Piro, right? And then you used to be a part of a group called The Last Save Point.
So look out for the next video that we release or podcast we release, and maybe some video content in the future.
We're actually going to be talking about some animes coming up. So I hope you enjoyed us being cordial to each other for a while, because I'm looking at this tier list and it's going to be messy.
Yeah, they're definitely gonna fight. So if you want to see us just yell at each other, look out for that next video.
Yeah, definitely. So if you want good conversation, join into the Big Pee Club, name pending. We're definitely thinking of something else there, you know. But maybe you can help us out with that if we do have a comment section up. Maybe you guys can help us figure out the name. That would actually be kind of cool, like a crowdsourced name of the podcast.
You're like podcast McPodcast face. Like,
Oh
that's
God.
what's gonna happen.
I know it's gonna be that now. I'd be happy with that though. If we're podcast McPodcast face, I'll take it.
So tune in next time.
Yep. Thanks for listening.
We'll see you maybe next month, next week. Who knows?
It's a mystery. Be ready.